Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. Yes, we've changed format this season. If you're just now listening to this episode, we encourage you, go on back to the beginning of season 3, where we became a much more guest-driven show, and instead of looking at a movie 1 minute at a time, we actually bring in a guest and look at their life 1 moment at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders, and joined as always, my co-host extraordinaire, Walt Murray. Walt, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great, buddy. What's going on?
Did that, not even written it down. I just rolled and didn't make a mistake.
Wow, that is pretty impressive.
I need to write that down now and make sure I can use it from now on.
Yeah, just get that transcribed.
Just cut and paste the open. That'll be our open from now on. God, he's remarkably consistent starting at episode 22.
See, sometimes we're a whole lot better when we don't prepare.
Well, good. Then we're in for a hit show today.
Yeah, we sure are.
So, you know, one of the things I complain to you incessantly off air, but I might as well let some of the listeners in a little behind the curtains. With 4 kids that we've put through college in the last 6 years, and we've still got 1 going. We had lifetime gymnastics with 1. We had 2 that played soccer from age 5 all the way through varsity, and 1 all the way through college. 1 that dabbled at everything and never became a master of any. I ended up getting a computer about 12 years ago before they got expensive. Not they, the computers, they, my kids. And right. I haven't updated a single thing for 12 years. So things like rebooting takes 35, maybe 40 minutes before the computer's usable.
Ugh.
I was getting to the point where I was starting to edit audio, and I went to go edit the audio that I need to release, and normally a process that would take maybe 3 minutes or 2 minutes to kind of run a compressor or run just some of the things that I put on the audio to sort of massage it and make it a little bit easier was taking 25 and 30 minutes. So I decided I need to reboot it. Anyway, long story short, I have a really, really old shit computer, and I am going to have to address that here pretty soon. I'm spending more time waiting for the computer to do the things to help me than it would have taken to actually just manually make the changes.
Yeah, so what do they say? The right tool for the right job?
Yeah, well, this was the right tool 12 years ago.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well, I'll mention this late in the episode when we get to what are you watching, but I've been watching that show, Halt and Catch Fire. And it's about the beginnings of the microcomputer or the portable computer boom and how that all happened. You know, everybody's competing against IBM and seeing the old, you know, quote unquote laptops that weighed like 15 pounds and it had DOS and you had to like type WIN when they started up. And it really is, it's funny just to think about that kind of technology and how fast we've changed. So I can imagine the box that you're carrying around there has to be quite impressive.
Well, the cool thing, and what I'm trying to convince my wife in terms of an investment, I said, hey, honey, this was like the best of the best you could get. And because I'm pretty savvy, I didn't buy a pre-made computer. I did it all from scratch. So I could look for the best sale on the processor and then the best sale I could find online for the motherboard and then a video card and then the power supply and the case and the cooling. So I said, you know, I spent a good amount of money, not as much as if it had been pre-built, but I spent a pretty decent amount. It lasted 12 years. Can I do that again?
Yeah, there you go.
And I get the, how much is this going to cost? I said, maybe $2,000. And she's like, no, absolutely. I'm like, but honey, Walt got a boat. And it didn't work. Didn't work at all. She's
yeah,
like,
don't ever use me as the shill on that one.
I tried. I'm like, look at Walt. If Walt can get a boat,
people look at me and they're like, Walt can't make a good decision if it hits him in the face.
Like, well, yeah, my wife's like, this is the guy who jumped off a trampoline into a tree. You want me to use him as your measuring stick for sane purchases? Okay.
Right, exactly. Yes. No, I'm more of that ship's hull sticking out of the water that
you're actually in the middle of the Savannah River right now.
That's exactly right.
The channel.
Right off of St. Simon's. With my hull sticking out of the water to serve as an example of what not to do.
What not to do. So I'm going to continue to fight this fight. I do have my brother, actually, who is super IT savvy. He hit me up and he said, look, I could try to eBay this motherboard, not the motherboard, but a processor. I've got an i7 8th generation. I'm moving up to the new i10 whatever generation. And he said, if you wanted it, he goes, I'll just give it to you. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That saves me like $300 right there going ahead and getting a processor. So
there you go.
Maybe if I can figure out if anybody else is upgrading along the way, like, hey, what are you doing with that case? I hang out like outside the computer stores. You guys, I'll buy you some beer if you get me a case. I don't know. Kind of sad.
I know that's so little about computers. For somebody who worked at IBM for 10 years, I really know absolutely nothing about computers. So you start talking about all the stuff that's inside them. I'm like, what's the mouse connect to?
You're like that guy that when he opens up the case, he's just looking for the shoelace to retie. Like that's got to be what went wrong.
Pretty much. Yeah. Oh no, I would never open the case.
Open the case.
I'm not voiding this warranty. No way.
Yeah, I look at that sticker and go, this is not going to stop me.
Yeah, you look at that sticker the same way I look at the sticker that says, do not tear this tag off the mattress. Yeah.
So you're the guy that the velour ropes at the theater are like the magic ropes that can keep the masses from crossing the line. You're like, oh my God, I can't go any further. I've got velour ropes right in front of me. Obviously, I'm stuck right here. Until
they keep the masses back. They don't keep me back. To me, that's like kind of a loose rule, kind of optional.
Yeah. I look at it as, what does it say in the Pirates of the Caribbean? They're more like guidelines.
Yeah, right. Exactly. They apply to other people, not necessarily to me.
Yeah. And that drives my wife nuts, by the way, when I'm standing in the queue somewhere and there's obviously everyone following the rules. And I'm like, well, if they just want to follow along like sheep, how do I know that this applies to me? Nobody specifically told me. I'm not just going to assume. She's like, get back here. I'm like, no.
Probably 15, 20 years ago, we had the Atlanta Thrashers here in town. It was the NHL's team here in Atlanta. And a buddy of mine worked for them. He was a replay official. And I was talking to Scott and I said, hey man, I'm coming to the game this week. I'm going to come up and see you. And he said, oh no, I'm in the secured area. And, pedestrians can't come in there. You've got to be an NHL official. I was like, all right, well, cool. I'll see you Tuesday. And he's like, no. You can't come in there. I was like, all right. I'll see you then. So,
Tuesday. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
Tuesday it is.
8:00. So I come walking up and I see this place that it's like, NHL official entrance. So I walk by and there's a security guard standing there and he's like, hey man, how's it? Or he said, excuse me, what are you doing? I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? He's like, oh, good. And I walk right past him. He doesn't even stop me. I go to the elevator and I said, hey, what floor has the NHL officials? He's like, third floor. So I jump on, I ride up. Well, it opens into this area with a reception desk. And I walk up, I said, hey, I'm looking for Scott Tangeman. He's the replay official. They said, I'm sorry, you can't go back there. It's officials only. I was like, oh, past what point? And they said, oh, from right here. I was like, okay, great. Well, I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, great. I walk right past them. And I'm standing leaning against the big sign that says NHL officials only right outside of Scott's office when Scott walks up. And he's
like, what the hell?
How did you do that? I was like, I don't know. You just act like you know what you're doing and people let you through.
You know what's crazy? And I don't know if I've just learned this from the military or just life. If you have a sense you belong, it's amazing the number of people who won't even bother to question you. You just you act like you know like where you're going, what you're doing, or that you at least belong there. And it's amazing where you can go.
It really is. And you just be nice to people. And of course, I end up doing that some at work. So I've honed my skills over the years. But it is amazing what you can get away with and what rules may or may not apply to you at times.
See, you've got the get out of jail free card. You could always say, I'm kind of working a case and show your detective's license. I once somebody decides to ask for ID, that's it. Game over. I'm like, yeah, here, whoop, 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 and it's over.
Well, I'll tell you off the air how I handle that. But yeah, I try not to ever pull my ID out because I don't want people knowing who I am. And that's the story of why I'm not allowed back at Northside Hospital.
And that, boys and girls, is how you not get back into a hospital. Wow.
Yeah.
Like, these are the kinds of adventures we go on, and we think we're somehow like Billy Badass in the room. We're going to bring a guest on here in just a few seconds that's going to make everything you and I have ever done that we think is an adventure look like we're playing with crayons in the 4th grade.
Yeah. So, when I thought about, hey, Ryan would be a great guy to bring on, I'm like, yeah, we pretty much have got to hand in our man cards for this one.
Right.
And the more I read about the things he's done, the more I'm like, yeah, I pretty much haven't done anything in my life. So.
Yeah, we were talking before we started the show, sort of getting him settled in the green room, making sure he had, all of the, for him, normally we have like cupcakes and we have like sodas and stuff. He was like, no, man, like pure spring water, and I need some
granola
bars and granola bars and, some trail mix. But this guy, I just got done camping for the last like 12 straight days. And I'm thinking, wow, I told my wife the other day, I said, most people couldn't even deal with being outside for a couple of days. We've been out here for almost 2 weeks in nature, dealing with whatever sounds happen, wherever the temperatures go. You either dress for it or you're screwed. And we're thinking we're roughing it. Man, I might as well have been camping on my front porch compared to what this guy's gone through.
Yeah, you got mud on your shoes and you're like, look at me, I'm an adventurer.
Yeah, this guy looks at people like me and goes, that's it, and walks away.
Yes, absolutely. So, well, let's go ahead and introduce Ryan and let everybody actually enjoy what crazy stuff he's done. I'll just take a second to introduce him, and I know you've probably got some stuff on him too. But Ryan Waters is a friend of my sister's from high school, and he is a couple years younger than me. I know his older brother, and he has climbed, and I think I've got this number right, Mount Everest 5 times. He's an outdoor adventure guide. He has gone all over the world. He's been to both the North and South Pole. He has really done like everything adventure-wise that you can possibly imagine. And then I kept reading and I'm like, I never could have even imagined doing that. So I'm really looking forward to Ryan's story and also just kind of how he got there. But I'm going to open with this. Alan, you know my family, and Ryan knows my family, and my sister particularly. We're kind of a mess. And my sister and her husband, Oliver, were having dinner one night and ran into Ryan in a restaurant. And my sister has a little bit of trouble hearing around crowds. And so she was trying to kind of act like she knew what Ryan was saying. And she said, oh, what are you up to? And I guess he said, I'm going to climb Mount Everest next week. And she was like, oh, well, good luck, and and Oliver, her husband, is like, I can't believe she just said that. So Ryan walks away and Oliver goes, Ashley, did you know that he told you that he's going to climb Mount Everest? And she's like, wait, what? I was being nice because I couldn't hear him. And he told me he was climbing Mount Everest.
She's just doing the polite thing. Like,
yes, just
like he was saying something like, I'm about to go to the golf cart track. And
yeah, I'm running by Quick Trip to get a Coke in a minute. Oh, well, good luck with that. Hope it goes well.
I'm planning to go outdoors and look to see if the sun sets.
Yes. But I guess for some people that the sunset just isn't enough. You've got to see it from the highest point on the planet.
Well, let's just go ahead and stop beating around the bush. Audience, put your hands together. Let's give a warm round of applause for a guy who's been in some of the coldest places on Earth, Ryan Waters. Ryan, welcome to our listeners' lounge.
Hey guys, how's it going? Good to be here.
Good, Ryan. So did you know that story about my sister?
I did not hear that one before, no.
Do you remember that incident? Because when I was talking to her about it, she goes, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so embarrassed if you tell him that story. And I was like, oh, then I'm definitely telling him that story.
Yeah, of course, you know.
A little
No, I
hint.
don't.
What not to
It's
tell Walt.
probably, yeah. I would guess it's probably, you know, what I used to see all the folks back in Marietta or Atlanta area when I would go back for like Christmas times and stuff, it seems like. So it's probably at one of those random get-togethers where I probably ran into them, and you know, probably at a bar, I would imagine, or something like that.
That's
So,
what she said. It was at a bar. So
yeah.
knowing my family, that's always a good bet.
Well, Ryan, let's go ahead and set the stage. Walt already talked about Mount Everest, but you have in your repertoire, you've done some amazing things. You've climbed just about all of the known peaks. You've attempted at least a couple of the ones that you didn't reach the summit. You've walked across the North Pole. You've walked across the Antarctic. Let's first start with, at what point did somebody drop you on your head and you decided this is what a normal person does?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I got into the outdoors there and you know, outside Atlanta. Just we started rock climbing, and a lot of people don't realize, but there is good rock climbing in the Southeast. And I was always into camping and hiking and stuff, but then I got into rock climbing and just did that for the rest of my kind of high school time, and then did it through college. And then after I got out of college, I was like super obsessed with all things climbing for a lot of years. And I was working as a geologist when I got out of school, and I just had this big pull that I couldn't suppress. I just had this feeling that I wanted to be out traveling, adventuring, you know, going to big mountain ranges around the world. So I just really pursued it, and actually ended up kind of giving up that career as a geologist and took a job as like an assistant climbing instructor. And just like literally, I like to call it my mid-20s crisis, because I just like gave up on everything and basically went to work for like $40 a day and like lived out of the back of my SUV at a base camp. And that was like what set me on the path. And then I just kind of have been following it ever since. And yeah, it's been a long road, and it's been really amazing.
So what motivated you to really, you know, say, I'm going to go after all the big ones? You know, I'm going to go at those big peaks and see which ones I can knock down.
You know, I was an instructor for quite a while in mountains, mountaineering, and so there's inevitably you have your own targets, and you have certain mounts that interest you in various places in the world, and so I just started, you know, like kind of ticking them off, going and challenging myself on successively higher peaks, and going with friends of mine and stuff like that, and then eventually, you know, you maybe go down a track where, oh, I've climbed, you know, this certain mountains out of a certain set. And then you start kind of, oh, maybe I should try to climb more in the Himalayas, or more of the seven summits, or more of these. And so it kind of becomes a little bit of a side project to try to tick off those boxes. And I climbed in South America a lot first, and then I eventually went over to the Himalayas to kind of climb what I always call like a dream mountain, because I had seen it on the cover of a textbook in college. And I was just like, someday I'm going to go climb this mountain in the Himalayas. And I didn't know anything about it or anything like that. But eventually, you know, probably 8 years after I saw that picture, I ended up going over there and climbing that peak. It's like right next to Mount Everest. It's smaller. It's a 23,000 foot peak. But I just decided I had to get over there and do it. And then I was like, the fire was lit, and I wanted to go to the Himalayas all the time. And I basically spent the next, well, up until now, I mean, pretty much the last 15 to 18 years, I'm usually in the Himalayas, if not once, but sometimes twice in a year, just to go climbing or guiding. And so, yeah, it's a great passion of mine. And I just love getting on expeditions and climbing with a bunch of good people.
So what is the name of that peak?
That peak was called Pumori. It's that means daughter mountain. The Sherpas believe that it's the daughter of Mount Everest. It's right across the valley from it. And so I just loved it because it's a real beautiful pyramid looking peak, really steep on all sides. And I was just kind of enthralled with that mountain. And so I just kind of said, hey, that I want to try to climb that someday. And that was the first peak I climbed in the Himalayas.
Wow. Now here's where I'm just sitting here. I'm trying to imagine the dinner conversation where I say, honey, I've been climbing rocks in, like Stone Mountain area and then the gym. I think I'm ready for a South American trip to climb, like a big actual mountain, and I'm going to make a career at it. It feels like it's so surreal, but you're doing it. This is what you have made a career of.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know it sounds weird, and it is probably kind of weird, but
well, it's not weird. It's just amazing.
Yeah. For me, it's it be like anything else in life. It becomes pretty normal feeling. I feel super fortunate that I took that path. And so for me, and even like my family, who at first they thought the same thing, telling my parents, hey, I'm going to quit my job and just like go try to be what we said, like a dirtbag climber and just go do random stuff. They were like, okay, what, are you sure about this decision? But they were always supportive. They just knew that I had this kind of drive to go do it. And, so even now it's funny, I'll go to Pakistan or something on an expedition, and to my dad, he's just like, oh, cool. Which mountain is it now? And my mom, of course, worries a little bit more, but she's pretty in tune with it, and she trusts that things will be okay. And so hopefully she doesn't worry too much about it anymore.
All right. So for our listeners, that there may be some folks that are thinking, I've always wanted to try, but I don't even know where to start. I love hiking. I love climbing. Maybe I do go to a gym where it's all it's a fake kind of mountain, but I'm getting, stronger. I'm getting better at my holds, my grips, my techniques. At what point do you start reaching out, and what kind of a subculture, I guess, is there to support people that are green, that are brand new, that just have a desire?
I think the most common way is that path. Like I would say, especially these days, the first exposure people get to climbing in general is usually rock climbing, most likely at a gym, indoor gym, because they're so popular nowadays. And even more so now, where we see all these like movies coming out, with Alex Honnold climbing El Capitan, and it's a major motion picture and all that stuff. So people get their interest peaked. And if they start rock climbing, then not all people, but often people do have a desire to go to bigger mountains where you're not necessarily rock climbing all the time. You're just like using more mountaineering skills, like walking in crampons and climbing big glaciers and stuff. And so the first step is people usually take a course on how to do that stuff. And ironically, I just did a course here yesterday in Colorado for a group of 5 people. So I took out people that have never climbed anything. They just were have been like trekking around the mountains. And I did a skills course for a day up on a big snowfield here at just below like 10,000 feet, and just taught them all the basic skills, like using crampons and ice axes and how we do all that stuff for climbing big mountains. And now those people are like psyched to, they're asking me the rest of the day, like, what's the next step? What can we do? And I was just suggesting, well, we can go do a mountain out in the Western US, maybe next summer, and climb a big glaciated peak like Mount Rainier or Mount Baker or something like that. And so that's kind of how people get in, and they get the bug. And then if they really enjoy it, they tend to keep on seeking out those mountains.
Okay, so like at this point, I'm imagining sort of a variation of Indiana Jones. Do you have like worldwide contacts? Like, do you have your Sullas out there that like, oh, you want to climb Everest? I know who to contact, and they call you, and then you end up getting hooked up with a group?
Oh yeah, I mean, so my main work now is I own a guide service, and so we take people all over the world and climb mountains and ski to the poles and all this stuff. And so we're every day I'm fielding emails that people write into our company and say, I'm interested in that trip. And and then we're off to the races, just kind of start that correspondence, seeing what they're interested in, what they've done, and if it's like the right trip for them and that stuff. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I've got partners in probably like 8 or 9 countries around the world that are like my logistics partners, and we have storage units all over the world full of gear and tents, and so it's like definitely an international life. I mean, I'll work in a day and be talking to my Sherpa partner in Nepal, and then like hang up with them and call Argentina and talk to some of my guides, and then wire money to Indonesia, like all in the same day. So it's pretty crazy and really interesting.
So if you ever get an email from me saying, "Hey, I want to climb Everest or whatever," just delete it.
Okay.
I've somehow lost my mind, and my brain is trying to write checks my body can't cash. But when somebody really sets out and says, "I want to go climb Everest," can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to really climb Mount Everest?
I can, yeah. I mean, it's a, let's put it this way, it's a tough expedition for sure. But I will say that from the first time I ever went personally until nowadays when I go, it's still hard to climb. But it's like anything else that you do, is as you do it more and more, things get a little easier. And so, especially when you're a guide, it can't be that hard for you to climb a mountain, right? Because you got to be able to do the climb, but also be in charge of other people. And so,
right, you can't be crying in the fetal position.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's cold. I don't want to go out.
That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in your team.
I can't imagine. No. Okay, well, see, now all of a sudden, because my wife had a background for a long time working in law and legal. She was a senior paralegal at a firm. And now I'm thinking, is everybody signing away basically everything so they can't come back after you when they do something stupid and fall off the mountain?
Definitely, we have a pretty extensive liability waiver, for sure. I mean, it's just something that people understand. So, for example, most people that go to climb Mount Everest are doing it with a guide service or a guide. And they don't just come off the street and decide they want to go climb Everest like you will when you email me.
Walt.
They're usually people that have been with us, like us on many expeditions, right? They started on a lower mountain, something like Kilimanjaro, and worked their 1 year, and then maybe the next year they went on a bigger mountain, and then they kind of worked this. We have kind of like a track almost, like, yeah, the next one would be great to do this one. And so we're setting them up, if they have that desire, over years to get all the skills they'll need. And we're working with them and just mentoring them to say, like, yeah, this is the kind of training you'll need to do if you're going to go for Everest. And let's give you this program, and take 6 months ahead to get in good shape and the proper training and all that stuff. So we're really like bringing people along as much as we can, so that we know they have a realistic chance to summit. Like, we don't try to take people just to say, yeah, come with us, and we're not really interested if you summit, because there are operators out there that
we'll be back in 2 weeks. You just stay right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Leave them behind.
There's no shortage of people that will take your money and just say, they don't really necessarily expect that you'll summit. They just want to give you as far along as they can. And then, so, okay, well, sorry, but great trip. Whereas we try to, we only want to take people that we think have a realistic chance to get to the top and do it safely. So that's kind of like, it's a long process.
So the video game analogy is you've got to unlock certain lower achievements before you just get to go to the next level. You've got to do certain things before you feel comfortable taking him to the next tier.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So when Walt sends you that email, you go, dude, step 1, climb to the top of the stairs and then get back to me,
Right.
That's a good first step for sure.
Yeah. Own boots. That's
to go buy boots. Do you own a rope? In the back of my trunk? No,
Yeah.
wrong kind of rope, dude.
Yeah,
So-
that not quite what you're looking for.
Okay, so I was involved in in a JROTC program. I got involved in rappelling. I still to this day love rappelling. I had webbing and gear and carabiners and all that stuff. But I think I'm probably, again, only dabbling at what you guys would need for a summit like that, especially like the more advanced ones. How much gear does a person have to have, and what kind of an investment is it before they can start doing these much bigger, more intense climbs?
Well, if you're going with a guide service, we have all the group stuff on these mountains, right? All the tents and the climbing gear and all that. So it's really just a investment of personal equipment, and so it is quite expensive. If you take an Everest trip, for example, it's pretty specialized gear that you need to have. But what a lot of people may not realize is that if you are doing that stepping stone process through mountains that are a little lower on the way, a lot of that gear is actually the same that you're going to use later on Everest, just that you may need to get like certain pieces of gear just for Everest, like a big down suit that we'll need on the summit climb and certain kinds of boots that maybe are specific to Everest. But a lot of people already have a lot of the other climbing clothing and gear just because they've acquired it for these lower mountains, and you could use it later. But you are realistically looking at just like clothing and climbing equipment for a personal side, maybe $3,000 worth of stuff. You could get away with as far as clothing and gear. But so a lot of people just kind of acquire those pieces as they're getting into climbing, like harness and certain boots, and then they go to a bigger peak, so then they may need some different clothing and just like a little bit bigger jacket. And so people are like adding these layers of gear as they go up in progressively higher peaks.
So you're not, when you talk about doing a mountain like Everest, you're not talking about hiking one of the mountains in the Appalachian Trail. You're really talking about high skill level, very technical climbing, really going beyond what you're going to even probably experience anywhere in North America.
Right. Yeah. To some extent. I mean, for example, you could look at like Mount Rainier in Washington State. It's only 14,000 feet high, which is a big mountain. But if you compared it to something like Everest, which is actually about twice as high as Mount Rainier, a lot of the skills and how you climb and the techniques you use, and to some extent, a lot of the equipment is all the same. It's just that later on, when you're on Mount Everest, it's obviously much bigger, much longer. There's a lot more involved with like staff and Sherpas and people kind of equipping the route for the clients with fixed ropes and like making camps for people. And so you do want to be like as competent as you can be as a individual, but as guides, what we try to do is make it as, I wouldn't say as easy as we can, but like the most efficient as we can for people, so that they can just like concentrate on the climbing itself and not have to worry about all the other stuff. Like that's our job, is to manage the risk and the objective hazards and when to go, and like looking at weather reports and fixing all the camps so that people are properly set up when they get there. So it's a pretty involved process for sure. I mean, we take months and months to plan each trip when we go to the Himalayas. And so it's very involved, but once you've done it a lot, it's kind of like a recipe. We know we have all of our gear over there. I mean, we even have a storage unit in a village that's like an hour's walk away from Everest Base Camp. So we have like a bunch of tents and gear that just lives there all year long in barrels in a storage room. So we have a lot of lists of things that are cached all over the world. And it's pretty interesting to kind of keep track of all that stuff.
That's pretty amazing.
All right.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about the mountain climbing aspect, and of course that's sort of like your bread and butter. But when Walt was giving me some of the things you've done, you have been both to see emperor penguins as well as Santa Claus. You want to tell me about going across both poles?
Yeah. I mean, I got into this very weird world called polar, I guess you'd call polar skiing expeditions, which is basically like trying to reach the South Pole, which is the first one I went to. And it's something I never really dreamed that I would get the opportunity to do because it's quite expensive to get down and do those expeditions. And I never originally had a desire to, though I always thought it would be cool to try to ski to the South Pole someday. But then I got the opportunity to be involved with a trip there back in 2009 was the first time I went to Antarctica. And so it was a relationship I had at the time, and we went and did a kind of a training ski, if you will, and we skied across Greenland from west to east in preparation for that Antarctica trip. And then we went down and actually did a kind of a crossing of Antarctica. And so the idea was to ski to the South Pole from a kind of a weird, unique spot, starting point on the coast, which not a lot of people go from. And we hadn't told anyone, but we were planning to try to cross to the other side. And so it was a pretty involved expedition. It took us 70 days, and we skied about 1,200 miles and went from one side of Antarctica to the South Pole and then over to the ice shelf on the other side of Antarctica. So it was pretty crazy and very difficult, very mentally challenging, obviously physically challenging, but so rewarding. And I really got to love the polar ski expeditions as kind of like a complement to mountain climbing trips, and because they are similar in some ways, but very different in other ways. And so then I was kind of in that world as well as being an alpine climber. And so back in like 2014 is when I ended up going to the North Pole on what we call like a full length trip from the coast. Me and a partner, Eric Larson, an American, we went from Canada on the north side of Ellesmere Island and skied to the North Pole, which took 53 days to do on the Arctic Ocean, and reached the pole unsupported and unassisted, meaning we took all of our stuff, no resupplies. And that was epic. That was the hardest trip for sure I've ever done. And we actually made a TV show on it. It was a Discovery Channel and Animal Planet 2-hour documentary. And that was really cool. It was really hard because we filmed our own trip. And then, so that made it even longer. But it was cool. They were one of our sponsors for the expedition. So we had to deliver film in order, that was our relationship to get the sponsorship. So
in both of those instances, because I know we're living in 21st century, techno everywhere. How much internet service do you get when you're on the South Pole?
Right. Are you watching Netflix? Is where he's going.
Yeah. Did you watch your own documentary as it was being shot?
That's right. Ironically, so me and I skied across Antarctica with a woman, Cecilia Skog. She's Norwegian. And back then, 2009, you got to imagine that Facebook was almost brand new, and there was really no such thing as social media. There was no Instagram. And so it's changed so much since then, because now when people do even just go out and like walk on hills, they take these very staged, elegant pictures of them doing stuff outdoors and, upload it immediately, and can definitely make themselves look like a great outdoor adventurer and get all these likes and stuff. And so it's kind of ironic because a lot of the very hardest expeditions out there, people can't really do that, while you're doing it, because you're so focused on the trip and completing it. And the idea used to be to like bring back content for sponsors or whatever later, and then tell a story. Whereas now it's much more in the moment because of social media. If you're anywhere where there's a cell service, then you can just like constantly upload stuff. So Antarctica, you don't do it because there is no good way really to to be connected.
You don't have a hotspot. You can't just like log in and
Ironically, you can nowadays. It's still slow just through satellite hubs. But
really,
yeah. But in the Arctic Ocean, I mean, you can as well, but there's just no time for that. You can't take the time to be uploading stuff. Battery power is so important that, like when we went to the North Pole on that expedition, we powered all of our electronics, which isn't that much, but the biggest things we had were cameras because we were filming our own trip. So we had to charge camera batteries. And so it's not good enough sun that time of the year to really even bring solar panels to make them effective. So we had to kind of manufacture these little charging cords that we used lithium AA's, like a cluster of lithium AA's to recharge camera batteries and stuff like that. So everything is so down to the detail of like necessity that you wouldn't be able to kind of really be in good contact. Even if you had a super fast hub up on the Arctic Ocean, you just don't have the time or the batteries to do that kind of stuff.
Wow. I didn't even think about having not enough daylight or strong enough sunlight at the poles to be able to use a solar charger. So you're like, what, doing the Gilligan's Island thing, using like a hand crank in the tent to kind of recharge the batteries at night?
Ironically, in Antarctica, it is good sun. So people usually go to Antarctica in the summer there, and it's 24-hour sunlight because it's at the bottom of the world. And so you got the sun on the southern hemisphere during their summer.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
So the sun never sets during that whole time. So like on that 70-day expedition, there was never a sunset, right? It sun's up all the time. It just kind of gets a little lower in the sky during the nighttime. So you can use solar panels in Antarctica, but near the North Pole, the style of trip we did, which was from Canada, and it takes so long, it's over the Arctic Ocean, that you have to start really early in the spring. And at that time, the sun is very low on the horizon, and you have not much light for very long in the daytime. So you can't really use solar panels on the Arctic Ocean until much later. And it just, the way the timing works out, we couldn't bring them.
So does that end up kind of messing with your mind when you have that many days of sunlight or that many days of darkness?
I don't think so. I mean, personally, it's not a big deal. When you're doing trips that are so intensive and physically demanding, like when you get in the tent at nighttime, even if it's light out, all you want to do is like get in that nice warm sleeping bag and go to sleep, and you don't care if it's sunlight outside. I mean, it's like you just get snuggled into that sleeping bag, close it up, and you're out.
And I guess you are very focused on what you're doing.
Yeah. You're. I guide people down there in Antarctica every year, and so that's kind of a joke, right? You have to tell people on the gear list that they don't need to bring a headlamp, which is like standard procedure when you go on a trip. You always have a headlamp with you if you're climbing or need it to read at night or whatever. And people just can't really wrap their head around that. Like, no, you don't need a headlamp because it's light all the time. So even when you go to sleep at night, you can just read a book. But and they'll bring like the eye shades that you get on airplanes and stuff. And I just kind of laugh because I just don't need them. I just go to sleep. It's not a big deal.
All right. So now I'm thinking back. You talk about making your own documentary, and you're going during optimal times, I'm assuming, for weather, because you can have some like life-ending storms in the dead of winter at either of these, extreme places. And I remember watching a documentary on these guys filming these emperor penguins, and they got to where there was winds like over 100-mile-an-hour winds, and it was just negative, like outer space temperatures. And I'm
Right.
like, how are you surviving out there to film penguins? Right. But I mean, do you just get accustomed, or just you have the gear? I mean, how do you handle the temperature?
It's a little of those two things you just said. you have the right gear and you get a little accustomed to it. I mean, honestly, there are times when it's so extreme, like from a wind and cold standpoint, that it makes more sense to not be outside. And so you got to like set up camp early or whatever. It can get too bad to be out skiing, for example, but it's not that often in the summertime that occurs down there. So, I mean, the coldest temperature I've felt, I believe, was probably on the Arctic Ocean. And it was like the ambient temperature was like minus 55 or so. But that didn't take into account the wind chill, which makes it much colder. So it could have been, 60 or less below zero. But if you have the right equipment and you're skiing and you're pulling sleds and that it weigh 300 pounds over big ice chunks and all this stuff, you're working and you're very focused, you don't really notice how cold it is. You're just kind of like in the moment. And then where you do get cold is once you stop. As soon as you stop moving, that's when you get cold really fast. So we just don't ever stop much on those trips. So you ski all day for like hour-long blocks of time. And then you only break for like 10 minutes at a time sitting on your sled, and you kind of eat snack food for breaks and stuff and drink a little bit, and then you just get up and keep skiing. So you don't ever really stop for long. And the only time you do stop is when you're going to make the camp at night. And we put these big down jackets on, make the tent, jump in there with all the warm stuff, and then you're out of the elements, and then you can kind of relax a little bit.
So when you finish one of these, you reach the peak of Everest for the first time or whatever, what is the feeling that you have? Do you have kind of the feeling of, I've really hit the mark here. I accomplished that goal, or is it like, okay, what's next?
It's a good, interesting one. I would say most often the immediate feeling is where you got done with that. But I like to say mountaineers have short memories, because inevitably, even if it was like a really hard trip or a hard summit and all that stuff, it seems like as soon as you get back down to like base camp and you're kind of celebrating and talking with people, it's almost like inevitable that people then start talking about what's next. Like, cool, what about that mountain? So it's this weird kind of dynamic where people put themselves through really difficult trips and do a lot of hard work and not always successful, but even when they are or they're not, they have these like really short-term memories, and then it may take a week, but as soon as they get home, they'll be in front of their computer kind of scrolling around, imagining what the next trip is. It's just like everyone seems to have that feeling.
Wow. It is really mind blowing for me to think about. I mean, even just, getting up Everest, and I understand Everest isn't even the hardest mountain in the world to climb, but to be at the highest peak in the world has to just be an awesome feeling.
Oh yeah, it's super special. I mean, every time, and even if you go there a bunch of times, it's always a really amazing feeling to be standing up there. The first time I summited, I would say probably was the most special of those, obviously, but just because it's just like you said, you're like, oh my God, I'm up on the summit of Everest and looking around, and it's just that amazing feeling of personal accomplishment, but you also share it with your whole team because it takes, a lot of people to help each other and all that stuff. And then maybe you go and climb it again and it's still special. But so what I find now, because I guide Everest, is that I still feel cool. Like it feels really good to get to the top, but for me, I'm more focused on the people getting up. And so that's where it's like the really cool experience for me is looking around, looking at my other staff and saying, how amazing is this that we got all these people to the summit? And that's where you feel like the pride and kind of special feeling. Even though it's of course still cool for you to get up there as well.
Well, I'm sure it's got to be a great feeling, because out of that group, everybody's got some challenge and everybody's got something in their life that they could use as the reason not to go. and yet
Yeah.
they go and they make it to the top.
Yeah. It's not only Everest, but of course that's the perfect like petri dish for the conversation. But these outdoor adventures, especially mountain climbing, I guess you could relate to any kind of sport and stuff. It's a great outlet for meeting really interesting people from around, and especially like the climbing community is very international. And so you get a really cool, time spent with people from different countries working together, learning about where they come from, learning about what's the challenges where they are. Of course, they always want to talk about politics to Americans and just think how crazy we are here. And so it's like,
I get that.
You get all these cool conversations around the table at night when you're eating, and you learn stuff about different countries. And the other thing is you make good relationships. And so after so much time in the outdoors and traveling, is I have friends all over the world, and I can, fly to Spain or Argentina or a lot of different places, and I could have a friend or a client or someone that I know that lives there and kind of like goes and stay at their house for the night. So it's a really cool kind of community of people.
Yeah, no shortage of cool Christmas cards that you get from around the world, right?
That's right.
Okay, let me ask you this, because Walt asked an interesting question, but I have a different sort of take on it. Because at some point, you're sort of desensitizing. You've climbed to the top of a mountain. Is there a moment that you look back and go, this has still been the most spectacular moment thus far in my career as a climber? Was there one particular where you look back and go, even if I've climbed Everest 8 times, it was trip number 3 I'll never forget because of X? Do you have one of those stories?
It's a tough one. It's if you're just a mountain climber, I think there's a lot more of those feelings. I definitely have those. I'll put it that way. Start when you're there in the big mountains in the Himalayas, and there for almost 2 decades over expeditions. I think the stuff that sticks out even more sometimes is the tragedies actually that you may have been around and like been experienced, unfortunately, and stuff like that. Like being involved in rescues of other climbers, or, I was in the Everest base camp in the year when this massive earthquake hit Nepal, and a big avalanche came down from, ironically, that mountain that was my dream mountain that I first climbed. A big ice rack came down and created an avalanche and ripped through base camp and killed 22 people. And so things like that, rescues in Pakistan from 20,000.
Now, wait a minute.
foot
Do you have like
camps.
a burrito warming up in a microwave behind you?
That was the coffee machine.
Okay.
Yeah, Alan, his diet consists mostly of junk food.
Yeah, burritos.
Well, you don't get many of those when you're crossing the Arctic. I thought you might kind of like load up in the downtime.
I
get my burrito quotient in.
I remembered one of those moments though. See, that's the problem with doing so much trips at high altitude, because then you start to lose your memory.
See, Walt, you need to use that for your excuse from now on.
I was going to say,
too many high altitude trips.
Not even at high altitude right now, and I'm
high might be involved with Walt, but has nothing to do with attitude.
I have 2 excuses, because I played football for a long time, and I've been a high altitude mountain climber for 20 years. So I'm like, anytime I can't remember something, I'm like, it's not my fault. High mountains.
It's my career. It's really my brain. So.
No, but I thought of one of those moments on a big peak is, in 2006, I went to Pakistan for the first time, to lead with another guy, a group of people, and we were going to try to climb a mountain called Broad Peak, which is an 8,000 meter peak there in Pakistan, and then go to K2, which is next to it, basically like an hour's walk away. The 2 base camps are, and and I had been in Tibet for 2 months guiding a mountain there called Cho Oyu, which is the fourth highest mountain in the world, or sixth, sorry. And we had climbed that peak, and then I went to Broad Peak in Pakistan, and we weren't guiding these people. We were like kind of hired as professional leaders because the group of people were competent mountaineers and they just wanted to have an organized trip. And so me and the other guy were kind of in charge of going ahead and fixing the ropes and doing stuff for this group. And it just so happened that on this day, the guys I was climbing with, we all got pretty high, and then they decided to turn around because one guy felt sick, and then some of the other local high altitude porters just didn't feel good about going further. And so I just said, I feel super good. The weather's awesome. I'm going to keep climbing. And I went the rest of the way to the summit, which that's a big mountain. It's like, 27,000 feet. And I climbed for like probably 6 hours, just by myself on just the perfect day in the Karakoram Himalaya, and amazing ridge, super kind of technical, really fun, amazing, just views, and was up there by myself. And that was just such a cool feeling because it was like I could have turned around and gone down with the guys, and that would have been good too. But I kind of was young enough and felt really strong at that time, and just felt like I'm willing to risk going by myself up here. And
Wow.
And I went and summited by myself, and then, went back down to the high camp and saw them much later. But that was a really special feeling to summit by myself, no oxygen on that peak. And it was just a really cool feeling. That one sticks out to me a lot.
Excellent. So everything was just clicking on that one particular climb.
Exactly. And there's some like definitely dangerous sections of that ridge that I was by myself, but I felt just really in tune with everything. And it was, I had a lot of confidence that I was not going to make a mistake. And so, it all clicked. It was really cool.
Well, as we're starting to get kind of caught up to where you are today, and a lot of it was all within the last, 10, 15 years, this has really been such an amazing story you're telling us. Is there anything you haven't done yet that is still on your to-do list in terms of a climb? Like I think K2, you haven't made it to the summit of K2 yet, right?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting one that always comes up. So that trip I was just talking about, we did go over to K2 after, and we spent about a month kind of catching up with the other teams that had been there the whole time, fixing ropes on the mountain, all that. And me and my climbing partners ended up like trying to push the route, like fix ropes to the high camp we were just working with all the other expeditions. And it was just really dangerous conditions that year, bad avalanche kind of slopes. And we just I didn't feel super good about it, especially because I had climbed 2 8,000 meter peaks in the 2 months prior. And so I decided that the conditions weren't right, and I didn't feel like I was strong enough after all that climbing to make a good summit bid. And so I chose, like I told my partners, I just don't feel good about going for a summit push because it's a very long summit day there, and we hadn't even got to the high camp yet because there weren't ropes fixed to it, and we were trying to carry all this heavy gear and fix ropes and all that stuff. I turned around, and in the end, my partners did too. And some Russian team tried to push the route to the summit, and like 4 people died in an avalanche on the summit, near the summit. So it was like, in the end, it was the right decision. And that was a really kind of educational moment for me to be able to make that call personally and say, I'll come back later, because it just doesn't feel right, per all the kind of aspects. And so I K2's always there. I think about it. There's just other things in life that starts to be, a bigger risk, to be on that kind of dangerous route. You're going to give up 2 months of your life and all that stuff. But, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't cross my mind a lot. I talk to some friends of mine sometimes, and it could be on the table. But there's some other mountains too that I'm thinking of in the Himalayas. So we'll see. Something's probably going to come up in the next year or two, like a little goal.
That's amazing. As we're, kind of again winding down the interview part, you've already kind of given us a heads up. You're going to hang out with us for a little bit, but you talked about being involved in already a documentary. You've got I think a book coming out. So I want to give you a chance, at least at this segment, and then we'll remind everybody at the end. You're at a point where your adventures are 10 times more impressive than most people's life stories. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, I've been kind of tinkering away at a book for a while, and I just couldn't. Originally, I was going to write one just about that Antarctica crossing expedition, but then after talking to some publishers and stuff, we held off for possibly a bigger thing. And so one of the things I did personally is I did this thing called the True Adventures Grand Slam, which means climbing the 7 summits and then doing those full North and South Pole trips, unsupported and unassisted. And I was the first American to do that. And there's only like 11 people, I think, in the world to have done that big kind of project. So then I decided that's the story is based around that. But I think the more interesting story is also all the things that involve the journey to get to that place, like the tragedies, the relationships, the successes, and all this weird stuff that happened along the way is kind of like more of a cool story than just the trips themselves. And so I finally got a co-writer, and that's helped me a tremendous amount to move the book forward, because then I write all the copy, and then my co-writer takes it and just like tells me, expand on that. Let's not talk about that. He'll ask me like, oh, what was that person? And so he prods and pokes, and then they really get you to tell the story. Whereas if you're not a writer necessarily, it's harder to do that. I'm just a dirtbag climber. And so,
and there's the title of your book.
There you go. And so, it's been amazing. And we got a publisher already, and I have a contract and all that. And so I'm a little over halfway done with the manuscript. And I think they're going to try to have it out next summer, last I heard. So we're just finishing up the story right now. And we'll see. We'll stay tuned. I mean, I'm definitely psyched to get it finished and then get it out there.
We'll have to have you back when it comes out.
Yeah.
Let you tell us a little bit more about the book. And then what is the name of your guide service, and how, if somebody is crazy enough, how do they reach out to you and find out more about what you do and how they might be a part of it?
My company is called Mountain Professionals, and, mtnprofessionals.com is a website that's got all of the trips we do, and like trainings and beginner climbs and all the way up to Everest and beyond. And so it's pretty informative just to kind of look through there and see if something piques the interest. And it's like anything from like school to learn how to climb all the way up to like bigger peaks. So it's pretty, it's a pretty exciting industry to be in. And I don't ever feel like I'm working, even if I'm in the office, because I really enjoy the process of planning expeditions and talking with clients and like teaching and instructing and all that stuff. And I have a lot of great staff that work for me, and we do really amazing trips. So it's a great lifestyle.
I've been on the website this whole time, just kind of looking at these pictures. And one of the questions I was going to ask, but I think I already know the answer. As magnificent as these shots are, I got to imagine nothing beats seeing it live. There's just no way to capture what it looks like.
That's the challenge of photography in the mountains. Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, the good thing is you can snap a picture in some of those locations and it's going to be dramatic no matter what. But you're right. It's hard to capture the real feeling.
I mean, I'm looking at one where I'm seeing folks, climbing up what looks like a snowy hill with a little peak in the background. And then I realize, oh, wait, Those are clouds behind him. They're above the freaking clouds.
That's right. Yeah, it's probably an Everest shot. Who knows?
That's amazing. That, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around somebody growing up in and around Marietta, Georgia, deciding a rock climbing sort of hobby turned a little bit more professional, turning to, well, what if I went on this trip and now you are known as a guide to the 7 major summits. It's I can't even imagine we're talking to you. That's amazing to me. So if you ever feel like somehow you've got that day in the office where you're like, did I really do? Yes, you have done amazing. Don't ever, you can look at the rest of us schlubs and we think we're cool because we set up a pup tent and have a microwave to go camping. Right. So, I'm just in awe. This whole time I've been texting Walt. I'm like, I feel like I'm interviewing somebody that's talking about what it was like to film a movie, not actually live this life. That you've got a movie, you've got a life that Jim Morrison once said in one of his songs in The Doors. Did you have a good world when you died, enough to base a movie on? Well, I'm waiting for your movie because you certainly have done it.
Nice. Well, you can get the book first. There you go.
Get the book, and then someone will option Netflix. There you go.
And the book's always better.
That's right.
Well, what's better is we've got him here, right, live in our listeners' lounge.
Well, I was going to say, you talk about, I climbed Everest. Well, for me, for the next 2 weeks, it'll be like, I had that dude who climbed Everest on my show.
yeah. Our claim to fame.
That's my brag.
Hey, we're like 1 degree of separation. It's almost like we were there.
That's right. We talked to the guy who did it.
All right. Well, Ryan, you want to hang out with us? You said you've got some time. So we do a couple of nutty things towards the end here. So you want to join in and riff on some fun, weird, odd news and things?
Let's do it.
All right, Walt, it's time for us to go to you for our segment we like to call...
Bring out your dead!
All right, so I'm about to read this obituary, and it's very important that you pay attention to the name because you will hear the name later today. Cornelia Jones Rogers Miller. Got it?
Okay, Cornelia Jones Miller.
I'm sorry, Cornelia June Rogers Miller. Remember that name. She was born June 12th, 1934 in Morton, Mississippi. Left us on Thursday, February 23rd, 2017. She died alone after a long battle with drug addiction and depression. She resided in Gainesville, Florida, spent summers in Murphy, North Carolina, until she, with her husband and son, moved to High Springs, Florida. She is survived by her husband, Robert William Miller, 86, and her son, Robert William Miller Jr., who lives at home. She is survived by 2 daughters. She has this whole long list of family. We're thankful for the life that issued forth because of June. We wish she could have appreciated the abundance of life she was given. Drugs were a major love in her life, as June had no hobbies, made no contribution to society, and rarely shared a kind word or deed anywhere in her life. Please let June Miller's life be a cautionary tale. Addiction and hatred are no bueno for the living. We speak for the majority of the family when we say her presence will not be missed by many, very few tears will be shed, and there will be no lamenting over her passing. Her family will remember June, and amongst ourselves will remember her in her own way, which were mostly sad and troubling times throughout the years. We may have some fond memories of her, but perhaps we will think of those times at some point too.
Wow.
But we truly believe that at the end of the day, all of us will really only miss what we never had: a mother, grandmother, and great grandmother. We hope she's finally at peace. As for the rest of us left behind, we hope this is the beginning of a time of healing and learning to be a family again. There will be no service, no prayers, no closure for the family she spent a lifetime tearing apart. We cannot come together in the end to see it that her grandchildren can say goodbye. Her legacy is written, so we will just say goodbye. Okay, so remember that name, Cornelia June Rogers Miller.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you ready for the next segment?
Wait a minute. What do you mean next segment?
Well, it's time to move on to our next segment, right? The news.
Oh, okay. So we're done with the Bring Out Your Dead.
Yes, but remember that name. Remember that name, Cornelia June Rogers Miller.
Okay, I feel like we're trying something new here, and you forgot to tell me. So
No, I'm just putting the ball on the tee here.
Okay, well, because then the next segment we move right into is
It's no bullshit.
Okay, so here's my first story. This comes from countryliving.com. This great-grandmother's shocking obituary went viral for all the wrong reasons.
I think I see the tie-in.
So please let June Miller's life be a cautionary tale. The unflattering obituary reads, addiction and hatred were no bueno for the living. A North Carolina newspaper ran a mean-spirited obituary last month about an 82-year-old great-grandmother who had an alleged complicated past, and now her son is claiming the accusations are not true.
What?
The family is now searching for the writer responsible for stating that
it wasn't a family member?
No. The family's now searching for the writer responsible for stating that the late Cornelia June Rogers Miller had a lifelong drug addiction and that her presence will not be missed by many. June Miller died in February, and the obituary in question was published 4 months after her death on June 27th. The whole thing is just sad, June's son, Robert Miller, told WTVC. It's really sad that they don't have anything better to do.
Oh, my God.
So they go through and recount the obituary. WTVC recently found that the unknown writer might have plagiarized from another obituary from a woman named Dolores Aguilar. You may remember her from about a month ago when we read her obituary.
Wow, Walt, who knew that you were going to thread all of these little, details from all these episodes? People are going to have to go back and listen. Like, wait a minute, I got to go back. Which one was that?
This segment has become a tangled web. So Dolores Aguilar ran in 2018 in the Vallejo Times Herald in California. Robert thought it might have been a prank from one of his sisters. But as WTVC reports, one sister has denied such accusations and said the situation was sad and tragic. If you have any details of this, please contact the TV station immediately with details.
It's no bullshit.
Oh, wow. See, Walt, I know you didn't actually plan that, but that goes to prove the saying that a blind squirrel does find a nut every now and then. Well done.
No, and I can guarantee I did not plan that. I remember that past thing, and I started reading this one. I was like, wait a minute. This is nearly the exact same obituary as that lady a couple of months ago. And I was about to go look it up. And then I saw this related story that was attached to it. And I thought, well, this has got to be the obituary of the week. And then that's got to be my opening news story.
I love it. Well done. Well done, sir.
Thank you very much.
In fact, I think we're going to go downhill from here, but I will go ahead and give it a shot because I've got the next story. A French couple trying to buy a Savannah cat ends up with the wrong kind of feline. Now, prosecutors in France said the couple paid $7,000 for a Savannah cat, which is a mix between an African serval and a domestic cat. Now, let me ask our world traveler, is that how you say that, an African serval?
Yep, it is. I've seen one in the wild.
So an African serval and a domestic cat. And I've seen some of these, like I think Georgia has rules that you can't have this kind of cat because they look almost like mini versions of like jaguars or sables and things like that. But in this case, the couple, they were able to have them in France and so ordered this cat from an online ad. But they ended up having to surrender the animal when it turned out that the Savannah cat was actually just an actual Sumatran tiger.
Oh!
Wow, the cat keeps getting big. The French couple who purchased what they thought was that exotic Savannah from an online ad had to turn the feline over to authorities when they found out it was a tiger cub. Prosecutors in Le Havre said that the couple encountered the online ad in 2018 offering a baby Savannah cat. The couple paid the $7,000 for the kitten, but after about a week in their care, the couple suspected this may not in fact be a Savannah cat. but they decided to go ahead and keep it for a little while longer. Turns out it was the Sumatran tiger, an endangered species native to Indonesia. The prosecutor said the incident... Dog, you're ruining my tape. Stop it. The prosecutor said the incident sparked a 2-year investigation that culminated this past week with the arrest of 9 people. The couple who purchased the cat were among those arrested, but then later released by police. Authorities said animal trafficking charges are being sought in the case. The tiger cub is now in the care of the French Biodiversity Office.
It's no bullshit.
Can you imagine thinking you're getting kind of this neat exotic pet and realize, oh my God, I'm about to become the next Siegfried and Roy act in my neighborhood?
And they paid $7,000 for a cat.
Well, there's that.
I mean, to quote George Costanza, I could go out in the alley and grab you a cat.
You want a cat? I can get you a cat.
That is insane. And can you imagine? I mean, that thing would tear you to pieces.
I was just imagining when you get it as a kid and you're thinking, okay, it's kind of tigerish, but it's cute and small. And then a few weeks later, you're going, it keeps getting bigger.
Oh,
I think you may want to double check, Google it, but I've recently heard that there's more tigers in Texas than there are in the wild.
what?
Yeah, that are like pets of people in Texas, like that bought actual tigers
Oh
that
my
are living there.
gosh. Like Joe Exotic?
Yeah, like at either as pets or else they're like living on farms that are kind of protecting animals. And so there's more in the state of Texas than there are in the wild and the rest of the world.
That's
That is
crazy.
insane.
I don't doubt it, but it's crazy.
No,
You know,
somehow I totally believe that.
I've always thought it'd be cool to have, something like that from its very infancy. It binds with you, and then but you got to trust that animal. I see these guys, they have bears that grow up and they're on preserves, and these bears are, 1,200 pounds and could maul them if they decide that they're in a pissed off mood with you, There's a point where I'm like, that'd be cool, but then I'd still be scared.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Well, cats on a good day are kind of treacherous anyway, but all right. Well, you ready for the next crazy story?
Go for it, Walt.
We've all had to adjust our lives with the pandemic and having to go more electronic. But 2 Bay Area teachers are now on leave after allegedly forgetting to log out of class and for criticizing students.
Uh-oh.
Vallejo, California, the San Francisco Gate newspaper brings us this. 2 teachers at Bethel High School in Vallejo have been placed on leave after the district says it received a complaint that the teachers were caught speaking negatively about students. That may be the understatement of the story. The incident occurred Thursday after a distance learning English class and was filmed and posted to Facebook by a parent of one of the students. The audio captured one instructor calling students technologically illiterate, to which the other replied, "Older staff members say these kids are so technologically advanced." And I'm like, they're effing not. The first teacher can then be heard saying, "The things that impress them are so sad." Oh, you're impressed that kid can do a TikTok. It's literally one button. Other students were still logged in. Other parents were still logged in, even commenting like, "Do you know you're still being recorded?"
Oh my God. That's like was it the first or the second Naked Gun when the guy goes to the bathroom and he's still got the mic on?
Yeah, that was the first one. And my dad did the same thing. I meant to have him tell that story a couple weeks ago when he was on, but you never have this kind of conversation around a closed mic because you know what happens.
Oh, wow.
The Vallejo City Unified School District released a statement confirming 2 teachers are on administrative leave while the district investigates. According to a complaint, 2 teachers at Bethel High School were overheard speaking negatively about the previous class period and referenced a few students, the statement read. Apparently, the teachers hadn't properly logged out of the distance learning platform at the conclusion of instruction, and their remarks were overheard by others. VCUSD takes all student and parent complaints very seriously. We will evaluate our policies and procedures for online instruction and will address any specific complaints regarding the appropriate conduct of our faculty and staff. The teachers were not identified by the school district.
It's no bullshit.
Yeah, here's how you address it. Turn off your microphone. Log out.
Wow. And they kept going and going, and then people were like, hey, man, check this out. Look at this. How many people re-logged in? How many text messages went out to all the kids? Log back in, man. I don't want to log back in. No, log back in. Check this out. They're talking about us.
Yeah, you don't want to miss this. The teacher just dropped the F-bomb.
You know, this would be something that you and I would end up doing something stupid like this, and all of a sudden, we'd both get a text message that says, turn on or check out Facebook. You're on it. And we'd be like,
right.
Wow, look at that. We are on Facebook right now.
Well, did you see the class? I guess somebody was teaching their kindergarten or first grade class, and one of the kids, she starts yelling at him going, Robbie, turn off your camera. And the kid's mom is naked in the background getting dressed for work.
Oh, goodness gracious. Hey, well, you got to look for the silver lining in distance learning when you can take it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, I've got the last news story here, and this one, cue up the talking heads, because you're on a road to nowhere, or maybe a flight. During the pandemic, it's changed how the airline industry has tried to survive while finding passengers not wanting to travel. The coronavirus pandemic still keeps ravaging countries around the world and has had a crippling effect on business. And of course, one of the biggest is travel. COVID-19 has forced the cancellation of thousands upon thousands of flights, and similarly, businesses and locations relying on tourism have lost potentially millions of dollars in income. I would probably say billions at this point.
Yeah, probably.
But travel restrictions don't impact just the economy, but the travelers themselves. Who knows how many summer vacations, honeymoons, and trips to see friends and relatives were ruined? To many people, being on the move is second nature. While some of us are couch potatoes to whom quarantine didn't really change all that much, Walt, others find being confined within four walls intolerable. So while you can still, for example, camp and bike safely and while staying socially distant, it doesn't suit everyone. Some people just like the idea of flying somewhere, just getting into a plane and going. Well, with that in mind, Australian airline Qantas had a brilliantly stupid idea. As a company, they naturally like to make money. And because their planes could fly nowhere, why not sell a flight exactly there? Nowhere. Man, does the Rona do weird things. Despite how ridiculous it sounds, in mid-September, Qantas started offering the Great Southern Land Scenic Flight. The flight takes off from Sydney Domestic Airport and 7 hours later lands you right back where you started. The company says the travel simulation package is aimed at those who are missing the excitement of travel or are keen to wave to family and friends from 35,000 feet. If your thirst for the thrill of takeoff or the slight nervousness just before landing hits you, then you're in the target audience. The tour will fly over locations like Queensland, the Northern Territory, and New South Wales. Passengers can gaze at the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef, some various rock formations, Byron Bay, and Sydney Harbor. The company's website also promises some surprises during the flight. Not having been there, we couldn't tell you what they are, but there's something about maybe a celebrity host brought on board. Passengers who have bought the flight also get to enjoy a pre-flight breakfast at the Qantas Lounge in the Sydney airport. On the plane, the flight attendants will serve a lunch menu designed by the famous Australian chef Neil Perry. The one downside is that on-flight entertainment is not available. And, we really wanted to empty our bank accounts to find out what next blockbuster wasn't going to be released and watch an old movie on the screen. But, be that as it may, though the idea about the flight to nowhere is pretty weird, it wasn't only the Qantas management investors who liked it. When tickets went on sale, the whole plane, Walt, sold out in less than 10 minutes. What? It was, according to CEO Alan Joyce of Qantas, it's been the fastest selling flight in our history as an airline.
And what did they call it? Simulated travel?
Simulated travel. You're pretending like you're going somewhere, but you end up right where you started. You don't land anywhere other than the airport from which you left. You don't get to see anything except for what apparently is now the sellout seats, the window seats. Everyone wants those first. So there you go. It looks like China and Japan are quickly following with some of their airlines doing the exact same thing.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
Well, the celebrity host is not going to be, like somebody, like Clint Eastwood. It's going to be like, I'm Troy McClure. I was in such hits as.
You might remember me from movies like Road to Nowhere.
Yeah. I have such credits as Man Standing by Soda Machine. Yeah. It'll be me. They'll have me
such
on.
Epic stories as Gumball Chewer and Hair Comber. And the slightly edgy Into Bed pull-up covers.
Yeah, if they had me, it could be Man Carrying Bag.
Man Who Eats.
Yeah, that definitely is true.
All right. Well, that's our news, and maybe who knows? Maybe that'll catch on in the Rockies. I could see that being something maybe people would do more out west. I can't imagine booking a flight out of Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson International Airport and say, "Take me around the southeast." Yeah, I just don't see that happening.
The only way I'd do it is if it was in one of those 2-seat biplanes,
right?
Where you're really hanging.
And you're a
out
lot
there.
lower. You can actually make out people.
A lot lower. Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right. Well, let's go to the world of entertainment. And for that, we're going to give you guys what we've been watching, reading, and or listening to. We'll do watching first. Walt, we'll go to you. Then we'll hit Ryan, back to me, and we'll keep going around until we hit all three categories. Let's start with Walt. What you watching?
Well, one thing that I watched this week that I highly recommend, I can't believe I haven't seen this before, but there's a show called Halt and Catch Fire, and it is really fantastic. It just came out on Netflix this month. I think it was on FX. It is really, really good, and it's about the early years of personal computing and all that, and how all these companies were stealing information from each other and stealing employees, and just a lot of drama, but also some of the technical side of them trying to make the smaller machines. And it was funny because the first portable computer that they had was 48 pounds. Wow. And but the show is really, really good, well acted and well written. And I remember when it came out thinking, that's got to be pretty interesting. I wish I had started watching it then. I believe it's got either 4 or 5 seasons on Netflix, and I highly recommend it. I'm really enjoying this. I just finished season 1. I'm an episode into season 2, and it is really great. Also, this month, I noticed on Netflix, they have several really good World War II movies. Among them is A Bridge Too Far. If you have never seen that movie, it was made in the 70s, and I remember my parents taking me and my brother to see it in the theater. It is one of the best World War II movies you'll ever see. So check that out if you haven't seen that before.
That is in my collection of World War II movies. When my dad passed away, one of the things everyone, because he was a big World War II movie watcher, and so with DVDs and then eventually Blu-rays, he would never want to upgrade. He's like, I already own that on VHS. I'm like, Dad, you can't even get the VHS to hook up to the TV anymore. So we would all start replacing his collection of movies with DVDs. And when he passed away, I inherited all of them. And I have all those movies, including A Bridge Too Far. And you want to talk about a movie that had everyone at the time in it? I mean, it was Sean Connery, Ryan O'Neal, Michael Caine, Laurence Olivier,
Robert Redford. The list goes on and on. It's just
Gene Hackman. I mean, it's just so many Hollywood, mega stars all getting together to make this story about, just one bridge too far, being able to hold that or get to that last bridge. It's great. It's an amazing movie. And the fact that it's based on a real series of events is what makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, and fairly historically accurate. So definitely worth watching.
All right, what else you got?
Those are really the two things I wanted to bring up. I watch stuff all the time, but with sports kind of being in full gear right now, I'm watching some football, watching some baseball, a lot of stuff going on.
All right, Ryan, I don't even know where to start with somebody who's seen more amazing things than could ever be put forward on places like Netflix and Amazon Prime. But do you even decompress at times where you go, okay, time to binge Game of Thrones? I heard this was a cool show.
It's funny. Yeah, I mean, it for someone that doesn't watch a lot of stuff on TV, it's been an interesting experiment during this quarantine. And yeah, I mean, that's spending 6 months not traveling pretty much has been totally unique for me. And so I've pretty much have definitely binged a lot of totally weird shows that you wouldn't expect. I've probably watched The Office, all of the series at least 2 times, I would imagine. But I also like the kind of like totally insane ones. Like, have you seen the one Selling Sunset? That's just like a bunch of real estate agents in Los Angeles, like selling these $20 million houses on Netflix.
I have not.
Oh yeah.
So it's sort of a cross between like a reality / documentary.
Oh, total reality. It's awesome. Like just ridiculous reality show stuff that they all get themselves into while they're selling, $40 million houses. And so you wouldn't expect someone like me, I guess, probably to watch that stuff. But hey, when you have to, it's the only time I'm going to. So
yeah, you kind of need that mindless entertainment.
Yeah,
sometimes.
mindless stuff. I don't know. For me, for better or worse, though, I kind of go back to old stuff, even on to watch it again and again. Just because I think a lot of the new stuff is so weird and badly made nowadays. So it's hard for me to like stomach really bad TV shows that are on Netflix and stuff. It's kind of weird, but
no, I can understand that. I still love going back and watching episodes of Cheers and Seinfeld and stuff like that.
I started rewatching The West Wing as a series, which has been kind of interesting.
That's actually a very well written show.
Yeah.
Aaron Sorkin is a brilliant writer.
Yeah,
and not a bad cast of actors in there too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for me, I know this has been one of those long ones all season long, but I am. I think I said it a couple weeks ago or last week. I am now halfway through season 6 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, continuing my quest to have watched all of them finally, thanks to Netflix. It's given me that joy of being able to do that. That has been the only thing because we've been camping. I take that back. We did stream one evening. It was just the two of us, everybody that we were kind of camping with. They all wanted to go into town or they had appointments early in the morning, so they weren't going to spend the night. So we ended up watching a couple of episodes. So we're in the midst of season 3 of Longmire. So we're still working our way through that and really looking forward to continuing. So those are the 2 shows that I've been on already or watching and talking about, but I'm continuing them. So if you haven't given them a try, go on back. It's kind of neat to see, for me anyway, when The Next Generation was actually airing on network television, as that's the brand new show. It's kind of cool to go back and pick up episodes that I completely missed. The most recent one 2 nights ago was actually the one where James Doohan, who played Scotty in the original Star Trek and then the original Star Trek cast movies, was caught in a transporter beam for 75 years. And he was the guest star where they brought him back. And he was having a hard time dealing with the fact that here's this engineer of the Enterprise now on the new Enterprise and seeing how far technology had outpaced even his ability. It was a pretty interesting episode.
I'll have to go back and watch that one. I remember him being on it, but I don't think I was really watching.
Yeah, I thought it happened a lot earlier, but it was in season 6, like the 5th or 6th episode in season 6. Kind of late, because there's only 7 seasons, so I got one more after this. All right, let's go to reading, if anything. Walt, last time we talked to you, you were waiting for the Seinfeld book. Did you get it?
I got it finally, and they actually sent me a hard copy, and I've got the Kindle version, and it's called "Is This Something" by Jerry Seinfeld. I'm probably 30 pages in, and it does not disappoint. It's It's kind of classic Jerry Seinfeld, a lot of his good quips, and it's a good read so far. I hope to finish it this coming week, and I'll update you on that. But it looks like it's a good one, so definitely check that out if you're looking for something new to read.
Well, Ryan, I know you probably are reading a lot of your scripts and a lot of your notes and getting your feedback from your co-author. But is there anything you're reading besides the book you're working on?
I actually started reading that book, Sapiens. Have you guys heard of that?
Sapiens, no.
Yeah. It's author Yuval Harari. It's like the history of human beings. It's going back from the very beginning. It's super interesting. It was like a bestseller many months ago. But
so is it like a historical fiction or is it straight textbook?
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it's like it's nonfiction. It's just like literally the history of humankind. So it talks about how people started, agriculture and just like from the very beginning. So I'm only like 2 chapters in, but it's pretty amazing actually.
That sounds really cool.
I would love something like that. Just because you ask that all the time, like who stumbled across doing whatever and creating an entire industry or figuring out, oh, you can't plant this next to that. Like who was it that just like learned this by trial and error?
Exactly. That you should read it. It's quite fascinating actually. I mean, it's really, really cool.
That's the thing about this section. I end up spending more money on Amazon because of the books that people recommend, but I'm going to have to put that on my,
that one is because it touches the nerd in me about watching the documentaries and learning about some things. Everybody keeps saying, well, the science is set. No, I think even science continues to learn and evolve and grow as we learn more things. And I love when somebody can write it in such a way that it becomes a compelling learning adventure. It's not just a textbook.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, for me, reading has been relegated once again to nothing but news. We are in the midst of, here in the U.S., a pretty exciting news cycle. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. There's always at least a dozen breaking what feels like news stories. It's impossible, it feels like, to digest it all. If you try to get it only by watching a 60-minute news chunk, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. You just can't do it. It's nonstop. I both love and hate this time of year during an election cycle because there's never not something new to listen to, read, learn about, hear something breaking, waiting for the next either surprise, the next whatever it is, the next controversy, the next drop bomb, it's for me in the news talk business, it is nonstop. And so I am looking forward to November the 4th, that no matter what's going on then, whether we're in court or it's decided, that I can maybe curl up with an actual book, maybe a book called Sapiens, and and just enjoy the rest of my year in a book rather than in the news.
Yeah, I have a feeling that the election won't be over then, so you may have to wait a week or two after that. But yes, I hear what you're saying.
Been dealing with this shit all year long. I'm done.
Yeah, well, buckle up.
Buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a fun 2021.
Yeah, you got that right.
All right, well, let's circle around to our last thing as we're wrapping up the show. What are you listening to? Could be new music, could be old, could be digging into an old album. And it certainly could be podcasts, anything that we could recommend, because our podcast community, much like the mountain climbing community, it sounds like, it's not about trying to outpace each other. It's about trying to help and complement each other. And so we have a lot of friends to our podcast. And so I kind of want to give shout outs to those as well that you all might be listening to. Walt, let's start with you.
Yeah, I went back and have picked up listening to some more of the Rocky Minute over the last few days. And, those guys are good friends of ours. And Jason and Doug, but if you just want to laugh and you just need to kind of have a mental break, those guys go through all the Rocky movies. I think they're in Rocky 3 or just finished Rocky 3 this year. And those two guys are just hysterical. So definitely, if you haven't checked that out already, check out the Rocky Minute. Alan and I have been on it a couple different times. It's great. I'm also really digging ABCD TOS, which is a few guys breaking down the Star Trek original series episodes in alphabetical order. So you're jumping from season 3 to season 1 to season 2. Now I keep having to go back and rewatch all these Star Trek episodes just to kind of keep up with what they're talking about. So a lot of fun. Great. I mean, just a great podcast that those guys have put together. Tom Taylor, who was on a few weeks ago, is one of the guys there. Also, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, which is the 27th, this Saturday night, which is Halloween, Alan and I and BK, who y'all are familiar with, Barry King, will be hosting the, what is this, sixth annual Spooktacular. So it is a Halloween spectacular, and it is on WBHF radio. You can find that on TuneIn, or if you're local, within about 50 yards of the transmitter, you can hear it live on the radio.
Hey, now, be nice.
Well, it'll be dark, and well, I guess we have an FM signal too.
We've got FM. We're FM AM, but more importantly, you can stream. We have listeners around the world. Walt,
that's right.
Don't try to denigrate where we play.
I was just saying our target audience
pee in the pool.
People all over the world, and you can hear us live, or I know we'll probably post it on the WWII feed, and I know BK will post it on his Anchor feed. So check that out. The 6th annual WBHF Halloween Spooktacular, featuring Alan, BK, and myself.
You know, and no matter what, even if you don't catch it live on the 31st on Halloween night, we will in fact then export it and put it out as a special episode of our podcast.
Yeah, and that's just kind of a fun talk about mindless. That'll be a fun time. Just talk about old movies and all kinds of other great stuff.
It's all Halloween themed and related, whether it's music, soundtracks, movies, monsters, ghost stories, maybe even a couple of surprise guests as we make our way through. 3 hours of spooktacular fun.
And that's 9 to midnight on Halloween night.
All right, excellent. Let's go to Ryan. Are you into like the podcast thing? Do you download, like 70 shows all at once, start to finish, for when you go on your climbs?
Ironically, yes, I live and die with podcasts. It's the best thing ever to be on a trip for just going to sleep in a tent, because it's like you can turn on your phone, hit play, and just be doing something as opposed to just staring at the ceiling of a tent. So yeah, I've gotten a lot. I do that. I'll have like 10 different podcasts and download a bunch of them. But I don't know if Walt's a Georgia Bulldog or not.
Oh, yes, Walt? Definitely. Okay. Absolutely.
Well, I'll probably disappoint you then, because I went to Ole Miss. So
well, my niece is at Ole Miss right now.
Yeah, I got a lot of Ole Miss football podcasts. So that's primary right now. But I probably have a little bit more of the bigger ones or mainstream ones, because there's just a lot of content. Like I listen to a lot of Radio Lab and just more like science ones, just because they kind of just talk about random topics a lot, and TED interviews and stuff like that. And even though probably people with podcasts may not like Joe Rogan, he does have a lot of podcasts, so I do a lot of those on expeditions and stuff. So I'm all over the place. I just have like 20, 30 from a lot of different style of podcasts, so nothing super exciting.
I gotta ask this: are there any podcasts about what you do, about mountain climbing, about the hints and the tips, anything that someone might want to maybe sign up and listen to?
Actually, National Geographic has one called Overheard. And they're kind of cool, like shorter 15, 20 minute kind of topics on outdoor things. And they're not just on adventures, like a lot of adventure stories and stuff, but also just topics that are interesting of the outdoors. Could be about national parks or some cave in Indonesia or whatever, but there's a lot of like interesting people on there.
Excellent.
And what is that one called again?
It's the National Geographic Overheard is the name of that. Overheard at National Geographic.
Okay, I'm signing up for that right now. So I'll recommend that next week, because I'm sure that sounds like one I'm going to totally get down the rabbit hole on.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty awesome.
Well, I always try to do the mop up with not just what I'm listening to, but these are the shows I pretty much listen to every week, whether they have one episode. They may go bi-weekly, but we support several podcasts and they support us. And so I like to at least give them a big time shout out. It's starting to wrap up. They just had our minutes a few weeks back. In fact, the movie's probably done by the time this episode hits, but the Marine Corps Movie Minute, we have our good buddy, James Enstall, with Geek to Me Radio. Our other good buddy who was on in our early part of this season 3, Pat McCormick. By the way, James Enstall was too, but Pat McCormick, who just got done Saturday co-hosting the first ever inaugural Voice-Over Hall of Fame Awards. So that's on Facebook if you missed it, and go check that out. 60 Minutes with our buddies from over the pond in the UK, the Real Queens of Queens, the Bad Cop show. Of course, we've mentioned BK with the Halloween Spooktacular. He was actually our premiere guest in this season 3. BK on the Air Escape Pod podcast. You can check that out. Walt, you already mentioned ABCD TOS. I also want to do a shout out to the Indiana Jones Minute, which is where we first met Tom Taylor, and the good buddies here in Atlanta that put on a Gen Xer focused podcast called Radio Labyrinth. Very, very fun. Always got something interesting to talk about. Tim Andrews, the host of that show, man of 1,000 voices. You hear him on WSB Radio every morning from 9 to noon as part of the Von Hessler Doctrine. Always a good show. And you mentioned it already, but it can't hurt to mention again, our good buds from the Rocky Minute, who also joined us here in our listeners lounge this past season. So all of those podcasts, I subscribe, I listen to. I wouldn't recommend them if they weren't worth listening to.
Not all of them are children friendly, so be sure and check for the not safe for work or NC-17 marker. But yeah, I have listened to all or part of every one of those, and I'm the same way, Alan. I definitely recommend every one of them.
All right. Well, as we start to wrap up, and before we bid our guest a fond farewell, I said we'd circle back around to Ryan about his book that he's working on. And what's the name of the documentary while we're at it, that if somebody wants to go find the one you shot, if they go, holy crap, I can go see what this guy looks like and what he did crossing the North Pole. Give us some accolades and attaboys for Ryan Waters.
Nice. That documentary is you can get it on any of the places where you can purchase documentaries like iTunes or Google Play or even YouTube, and it's called Melting: The Last Race to the Pole. And that's it's because we talk a little bit about how the ice has changed so much in the Arctic, and a lot of the reason we are able to sell that as a story is because it's just dramatic in its own right, just the expedition itself. Like, we didn't have to make any kind of drama, and that's what we kind of sold Discovery Network on. But really is because we felt like we'll probably be the last people to do that trip from the coast of Canada or coast to the pole, because and so we called our trip The Last North, because it's getting so unstable on the Arctic Ocean that there's not even good enough ice for people to land planes and kind of pick adventures up and stuff anymore. And so even after we finished our trip, the company actually that does flight services up there for adventure people, they announced that they're going to stop doing that from here on out. So no one has done a trip to the North Pole from land since we did that in 2014. So it's quite interesting, just seeing all the drama and how hard it was and how difficult doing it unsupported. And it was really well done. We just filmed it and then gave it to the production company, and they made a really good story out of all of our footage. So I'd definitely check it out.
Now, did you get to narrate it, or did they bring other people in? Was there a guest narrator? I'm just curious, how much of it do we get to hear you guys talking and sharing your, thoughts, ideas, adventures, worries, concerns, versus how much is just sort of an overview of what you're doing?
No, it's really good. Like, so basically they did send the people that did the production is a Denver company, and they were here in Boulder while me and my partner Eric were training and preparing and getting ready. And so there's a lot of interviews of us before, and we're talking about like what we're worried about, concerned about, how we prepare, train, all that stuff. And then once we flew up on the expedition, it was just us filming the whole while we were there. So it's an added difficulty layer to that whole expedition, which is already really hard. And then once we got back, they also came back out to Boulder and did more interviews with us to like talk about the specific stories and all the stuff that happened. So it's constantly a back and forth between us doing interviews here back in the US and us up on the expedition, and really like seeing our filming and our point of view camera shots and inside the tent and the terrible weather. And we even almost got killed by polar bears while we were there. So it's like
wow,
all kinds of crazy stuff.
All right, this is going to be on, folks. You'll have in my what are you watching in the next couple of weeks. I'm sure it'll be. Oh yeah, there was this cool documentary. Remember the guy we had a couple of weeks ago? Yeah, I watched it. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to do that too.
Yeah, it's melting, and then I think hyphen, like the melting, and then the last race to the pole. That's how you find it if you just search for it in one of those platforms.
Wow. All right, and then do you have a title for your book yet? I know it's not out. It's going to be next year, more than likely at this rate. But what is the title? Have you come up with one?
I don't. We don't have one. It's a working title right now because the publishers tend to come up with titles. Even if you think you have the coolest title in the world, my co-writer said, don't worry and put too much effort into it because they're going to change it no matter what you come up with.
Oh, great.
So,
yeah.
We'll
welcome
see.
to the publishing world where they know more than you.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like in the Hollywood model. It's great when all the producers make a wonderful suggestion, but when a movie tanks, they're always like, well, it wasn't our fault. Like, yeah, sure. All right, Ryan, thank you so much for being part of our listeners' lounge. This has been a fascinating episode for us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was super fun. Good to hear all the crazy stories and obituaries and everything else. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan.
Look at Walt, look at me in this lounge and go, I could have been this if I had done the normal life. I am so glad I took the road less traveled, because look at these two, pot-bellied knuckleheads sitting there thinking they know what they're doing, sitting in a listener's lounge talking to people.
That's great. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. We really, really did enjoy it.
All right. Let me say this to everybody. We appreciate you, our audience out there. Before I sign us out, Walt, very quickly, where can people go? Maybe they knew about Ryan and they stumbled across this podcast. They have no idea about all the other ways they can get in touch with us. So quickly, how do they do it?
Well, the best way to find us is on Facebook. Well, actually, there are two great ways to find us. Facebook is one of them. Facebook.com/TheWilderRide. From there, you want to follow us, and then a button's going to pop up that says join our listeners group. And that is where you get all the news about our show, upcoming guests, former guests. When Ryan's book comes out, we'll be sure and put some information there. And also just a great place to relax and kick back. No politics, none of that nonsense. Just a lot of entertainment and stuff that people are watching, and movie memes and all kinds of fun stuff. So check that out. And then also our website is always a good place to find us. That is thewilderride.com. And what you do want to check out real quick is the Patreon stuff, because we're about to put some of that back behind the wall. And then we're going to have some new Patreon shows that we're going to work on with some other movies, some that you've probably heard of and very familiar with. And so be sure and check that out. And if you want to help out our show, also at Patreon, you can even throw us $1 or $2 a month, up to different levels of sponsorship. So we always appreciate that. We do have some costs associated with the show that if you want to help us out with, we would be much, much, much appreciative.
And come back next week, as always, for another edition of our Listeners Lounge. You'll never know who we have, but if you pay attention, you sign up, you're part of our listeners group, you'll get all of the information and you'll never miss an episode right here on the Listeners Lounge. Man, I feel like I'm going to go upstairs and just look at my wife and go, I have done nothing. I have accomplished nothing.
I was going to say, I'm going to go climb every hill in my neighborhood now.
Yeah. On the flip side, I did raise 4 girls, and some might call that a very harrowing trip.
That is an adventure.
I find that very harrowing, actually.
And the thing is, it's not 1 or 2 months. It's 18, 20, 23 years when you add it all up. And it's like, I don't even know if I remember my last 23 years. It was all them. It was all about them. So maybe that's why I haven't had any adventures. Now that they're gone, maybe now's the time to start going on
Now's the time.
Hey, I have a question. So this may be new to you guys. I know world adventurers, travelers, adventurers, detectives, but did you know dogs don't know how to tell time?
Yes, I have realized that.
So my dogs, they normally get fed, well, basically at 8. But because the days have been getting shorter and shorter and shorter, I've got one dumbass who goes, "Whoa, it's dark. This is normally when we eat." And so they start, all it takes is one, and then the rest of the brood loses their flipping mind. So anyways, they're all good now, anyway, for a moment.
Nice.
So, all right. So, where did we leave off? You just finished with telling Walt about National Geographic Overheard.
Correct.